اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا
ونستعينه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا رسول الله عبده ورسوله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وبعد. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. As usual on Ummat Awasata TV, we are here in this episode to look at the concept of religious festivals, the Islamic perspective. The Islamic perspective is always our main concern here on any issue we tend to address on this platform. We are all aware that presently there are some people who are celebrating one form of festival or the other, and that is why it is always in order to call the attention of the Muslims, the believers, to the fact that whatever we must engage ourselves in must be justified. It must have a justifiable basis. If the basis of our getting involved goes contrary to our creed, our aqidah, our belief in Allah, then getting involved in such practices or acts will be very, very dangerous to our well-being and our salvation, because religion is supposed to be the platform for the salvation of mankind. Well, during religious festivals, as brought to us in the Quran, servants of Allah or servants of God are expected to devote themselves in the acts of worship, not committing any forms of shirk, that is association of partners with Allah in the process of whatever religion or religious of on whatever festival is ongoing. Allah Ta'ala says, when he was talking about some religious rite or the festival of the Muslims particularly, he affirms that hunafa'a lillahi ghayra mushrikina bih. It's right to Hajj, Quran chapter 22 verse 31, that in the course of any forms of religious acts, servants of Allah, particularly the Muslims, are supposed to dedicate themselves. Allah says, dedicate yourself to Allah and do not commit shirk, association of partner with him. So any forms of festivals that are tantamount to shirk billah, association of partner with Allah, cannot be regarded as a religious festival. Because when we say something is religious, it has to do with Allah, it has to do with God. So the moment a thing is done and we can find traces of shirk billah, association of partners with Allah, that is calling some other things as God, or ascribing the attributes of God to some other things, or even sharing the qualities and the godhood, the divinity of Allah with any other thing, then that thing cannot be called religious festival. It could be something else. Allah says about religious festivals in the same surah, Surah to Hajj, verse 30, Quran chapter 22, verse 34 to 35. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ جَعَلْنَا مَنْسَكًا لِيَذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَى مَا رَزَقَهُم مِّن بَهِيمَةِ الْأَنْعَامِ فَإِلَٰهُكُمْ إِلَٰهٌ وَاحِدٌ فَلَهُ أَسْلِمُوا وَبَشِّرِ الْمُخْبِتِينَ. Meaning, and to every nation we assign acts of worship, acts of devotion, that they may mention the name of Allah on what He has given them, either of animals or any other thing. So your God is one God. Therefore, to Him should you submit and give good news to the humble. In this verse, Allah has clearly stated that for every nation, He has assigned to them forms of worship, which should characterize whatever forms of festivals they want to engage in. Because festivals are supposed to be moments when believers in God commemorate certain favors of God upon them. And therefore, it is expected that the first thing that will be paramount is to affirm and to assert that Allah is one, as contained in this verse we have just read, and that no other thing can take the place of Allah or can be likened to Allah. Allah also mentioned here the fact that we have to be devoted in the process, and that we should show sign of submissiveness to Him, to His will, and that we should be humble. In addition to all these, other features are the need for us to be committed to the remembrance of the names of Allah, the need for us to be patient over any forms of trials, especially when we celebrate Eid al-Adha, when we heard that Allah Ta'ala tried our father, Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ, and he was patient. That particular festival essentially is an embodiment of teaching, Islamic teaching about the need to be patient when Allah's trial comes. Allah also mentioned that part of what should characterize our festival or festivity is to be prayerful. To be prayerful, that is to supplicate to Allah. And then this verse ended in telling us that part of what should characterize our festivals are benevolent acts of spending to others, especially those who do not have. Now, let's briefly address the so-called festival of the moment. You hear during Christmas and during the January 1st New Year, you hear Muslims joining the non-Muslims to be congratulating themselves on New Year and saying, doing all sorts of acts, whether the ones that are conducted by the Muslims, because some Muslims go to the extent of going to the mosque to do vigil, night vigil, to do prayers, to do nafila. As much as these are acts of worship that are recommended, it cannot be done in the name of these festivals, because in the first place, these festivals are the basis of all these festivals, both the Christmas and the New Year, is nothing other than worship of idols. Because in the era in which we are, it has become of common knowledge that all those months, starting from January to February, March, April to December, they are essentially named after the worship of one form of Roman idols or the other. So they cannot actually be the moments Muslims should celebrate. If the origin of these festivals are worship of idols and remembrance of such idols of worship. As far as Christmas is concerned, which is supposed to be, according to those who celebrate it, the celebration of the birth of Isa, whom they call Jesus, alayhi salatu wasalam, Muslims are supposed to be well informed, because we have detailed information about Isa alayhi salatu wasalam and his mother in the Quran. So we do not have any reason to be confused about who Isa was, whom his mother was, and what Allah has said about them in the Quran. Specifically, we are told in the Quran that Isa was nothing but a prophet of Allah. So, because Isa was a human being, just like Muhammad and many other prophets, in his own case, he was born by a woman without a father. So, in the first place, it does not even go in line with any sense that somebody who is born by a human being, a woman, a mortal female, will be God. Because if he is God, then we have to raise so many questions that we may not get answers to. And the first of such questions is that out of 24,000 prophets of God, Isa was the number 23,999 of them. If he is God or is Lord and is to be celebrated, then we have to ask the question of who was the God of the era of the 23,998 prophets before him. Who was also the God when he was in the womb of his mother? Is there any moment that we can afford not to have God? So, therefore, it is convincing that no other person can be called God, not even Isa, who was born by a woman. Because it is not one of the characteristics of Allah or the attributes of Allah for him to be born. He said, Lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Allah said he was not born and he did not even give birth to any child in the Quran, and that you cannot liken him to any other fellow human beings. Allah is not a human being. One of the features of Allah is that Allah is ever there all the time. So for anybody to think that at a particular time somebody who could be called Allah or God was born, and meaning that at a particular time his pregnancy was not even conceived before he was born, so at those periods who was God, and when he was eventually born, and as we are told, he grew up, he had opposition from his disciples, and they decided to crucify him, to kill him. So if God was killed according to them, then at the moment he has been killed, who was then God? Or if you say he was a God of the sun, the question is that, is it that the God Father was so weak that he could not defend the killing of his son by some people? So all these things do not actually, and these are some of the reasons. And the fact that the Roman gods are the ones that are celebrated on January 1st. So many other, the Jews celebrate their own New Year in September and October. The Christians, in their own case, are just following the Roman gods' celebration, commemoration, by celebrating New Year on January 1st. So it will not sound sensible to any Muslim to participate in this kind of thing, because the basis of all this are nothing but idolatry. And in fact, when Muslims believe in these issues or these festivals, such Muslims is engaging in an act that can vitiate his or her creed. That's our creed, our belief. And when that is done, then you will now have to ask ourselves of the essence of our claim to be worshippers of Allah or believers in Allah. So with this basis and this analysis, it will not, the question of do we eat the food they serve us during the festival do not arise, because the food they definitely prepare and serve during these festivals are meant to affirm those erroneous beliefs which I refer to as things that can vitiate our creed. So we do not have to even have that belief, not to talk of taking the food that is meant to celebrate such belief. So on this basis, the religion of Islam is quite clear, and the Muslims do not have any cause to be misled on unreasonable basis of celebrating any form of festival. Our own festival, if you are talking of our new year is Muharram first, and this is because when the Quran says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, inna iddata shuhuri inda Allahi isna ashara shahran fi kitabillahi yawma khalaqa as-samawati wal ard minha arba'atun hurum zalika dinul qayyim walakinna akthara an-nas la ya'lamun." Allah told us in Surah Tawbah that since the day He created the heavens and the earth, He has ordained that there shall be 12 months in a year, and that 4 of them are sacred. And we know all this, and Allah makes us to understand that when the Prophet was asked about which are these months Allah is referring to, the Prophet mentioned Muharram, Safar, Rabiul Awwal, Rabiul Thani, Jumada Awwal, Jumada Thani, Rajab, Shaban, Ramadan, Zulqa'dah, Zulhijjah. They are 12. If the Prophet has brought this to us as guardians, then we do not have any cause to be misled anymore. So on this basis, let the Muslims remain on the path of guardians by not concerning themselves with what do not concern them, because the basis of all those things, what those people do, the non-Muslims have said, are baseless, and we cannot afford to do anything that are baseless. Don't forget that whatever we do, the Quran has clearly explained the worth of them. The Quran has also explained to us why we must do them, and the Quran has also explained, and the life of the Prophet has explained to us how to do them. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.